am Sarah Carter, a 34-year-old individual residing in New York with my spouse, Matthew Carter, who is 36 years old. Matthew is a distinguished architect who is commended by all for his thoughtfulness and the unconditional love he has for me. He is a gentleman and a source of tranquility. We have been in a relationship for a decade, which has provided us with the opportunity to comprehend each other's thoughts and actions. Nevertheless, that exact moment has left me with an emptiness that is unattainable. The issue is that I am unable to conceive. Our efforts have been exhaustive. Treatment at renowned hospitals, the implementation of a variety of medications, the modification of our diets, and the implementation of the most costly methods. However, our endeavors have appeared to be mere measures that fail to yield results over the years. My heart felt heavier each time I received the news that there was no outcome. Matthew's irises, despite their constant affection, appeared to harbor a silent yearning that he was unwilling to articulate. During the quiet nights, as Matthew slept peacefully on the soft pillow, I contemplated whether he had ever truly experienced the emptiness of a home filled with the laughter of children. I had considered allowing him to experience the joy of fatherhood. However, each time that notion crossed my mind, my heart grieved, as my affection for Matthew was too great to risk losing him. Then, one day, after experiencing numerous disappointments, I received a recommendation for a private infertility clinic in Brooklyn. The clinic was small but reputable, and the highly specialized physicians consistently pursued optimal solutions for challenging cases such as mine. That introduction was a final glimmer of hope, inspiring me to attempt once more, despite my awareness that each failure would have a profound impact on my psyche. I was unaware that this decision would initiate a new era of turmoil in my life. I arose at an early hour on the day of my clinic appointment, selected a modest yet chic dress, and proceeded directly to Brooklyn. The Sterling Women's Health Clinic was situated in a serene environment, in contrast to the bustling hospitals that were populated by anxious individuals. I experienced a slight sense of relief as I reminded myself that this could be a pivotal moment for Matthew and me. Upon my arrival, I proceeded to the reception desk to register and await my examination. The nurse called my name and escorted me to a private consultation room a moment later. The room's warm color scheme and gentle, woody aroma instilled a sense of security in me. I sat down, my heart racing as the door opened. Afterward, I was paralyzed. The man entered the room carrying a file of medical records and wearing a white blouse. However, his eyes were visibly astonished upon recognizing me. My respiration was held. For several seconds, the entire area appeared to be frozen. Ethan Sterling was my high school colleague, the lad who had once caused my heart to skip a beat, but their relationship never progressed beyond friendship for a variety of reasons. I was unaware of the duration of my gaze until Ethan smiled faintly and spoke in a deep voice that I had not heard in over a decade. "Sarah, I was not anticipating your presence here." It required a few seconds for me to regain my voice as my larynx was dry. "Ethan, are you employed at this location?" "Yes. A few years ago, I established this clinic. I never anticipated that you would become my patient." He pulled a chair and sat across from me, his eyes still filled with surprise but also mixed with something difficult to articulate. I attempted to conceal my bewilderment by smiling awkwardly. What a coincidence. I visited this location for a medical examination after hearing that it was highly regarded. I did not anticipate returning to your presence in this manner. Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on me in the same manner as before, as if he were able to discern every concealed sentiment within my mind. He promptly resumed his professional demeanor, first inquiring about my health status and prior remedies. Subsequently, he requested that I lie down for a physical examination. Despite my efforts to maintain composure, an electric current coursed down my spine as Ethan's fingertips contacted my skin. It was his meticulousness that enabled me to perceive each contact with greater clarity. He executed each task with a gentle, deliberate pace. I assured myself that I was hallucinating things. However, upon observing Ethan, I observed that he was also slightly unnatural. His eyes briefly erupted with an unforeseen emotion, but they swiftly returned to the composed demeanor of a professional physician. Ethan removed his gloves, sat back in his chair, and gazed attentively at the medical record after the examination concluded. Although your condition is not particularly severe, it necessitates more rigorous monitoring and treatment. I will prescribe specific medication, however, it is crucial that you attend routine exams at least once a week. This will enable me to monitor the treatment process and make timely adjustments. I was somewhat hesitant as a result of that recommendation. Examinations conducted on a weekly basis. That implied that I would have to visit Ethan more frequently. However, I promptly disregarded the notion, assuring myself that it was merely a medical issue and not a cause for concern. I comprehend. I am grateful, Ethan. It is acceptable. I will make every effort to assist you. The twinkling of his eyes was difficult to articulate as he gazed at me. I exited the clinic with a slight sense of bewilderment. However, I was unaware of the reason. I was hitched. I harbored affection for Matthew. I arrived here to restore my health, not to reflect on the past. However, I was unaware that this reunion would reveal a door that I should never have entered. I returned home in an unusual state of mind following the initial examination. Matthew inquired about the results with a smile, and I simply reiterated what Ethan had stated. Although my condition was not particularly severe, it necessitated ongoing treatment. He had complete faith in me, and he had no reservations. I endeavored to avoid dwelling on Ethan, but he was the one who exacerbated the situation. I visited him on a weekly basis. Initially, everything was routine. There was only the doctor and the patient. However, something progressively altered between us. Each time I entered the clinic, I could sense Ethan's gaze remaining on me for an additional moment. He spoke to me with a sonorous voice that was somehow peculiar. I was the same. I began to anticipate these follow-up appointments more eagerly than I should have. I began to observe minor details. The manner in which Ethan touched me during my exams was more gentle than that of any other doctor. He gazed at me upon my arrival in the room, occasionally displaying a faint suggestion of an unreadable smile. And then one day it all came together. I arrived at the clinic later than usual that day due to an essential meeting. The clinic was nearly deserted upon my arrival, with the exception of Ethan and a handful of nurses who were in the process of closing up. "Sarah, you are tardy." Upon my arrival, Ethan offered a gentle smile. "I apologize. A meeting is scheduled for me. Are you currently preoccupied? I am available to return at a later date if it is not practicable." "It is acceptable. I always have time for you as you are a unique patient." I am uncertain as to whether I was imagining it, but the manner in which he articulated it caused my pulse rate to accelerate. Upon his arrival at the clinic, I followed him in, and the door was secured behind me. I was able to perceive the tension in the air with greater clarity this time when I checked. His eyes were fixed on me with a gaze that was distinct from his previous gaze, and his hand extended its contact with me slightly. I experienced a dry pharynx and a sensation that my heart was on the brink of erupting. Ethan abruptly ceased. He gazed at me with profound blue eyes as if he were grappling with an issue. "Sarah." His voice was deep and raspy. Something was unstable. I am uncertain as to what motivated me to do so. However, I no longer entertained the notion. I simply knew that I was too weary to continue withholding. I regretted the absence of Ethan. I missed the sensation of someone gazing at me with genuine desire, as opposed to pity, as Matthew did. Ethan took me into his arms as I gazed upwards. Everything was akin to a hurricane. We collided, oblivious to our surroundings. The covenants, the moral codes, and all the barriers. Ethan elevated my face, his lips contacting mine with a sense of urgency, as if he had been anticipating this moment for an extended period. His hands caressed my skin, his breath was heated on my neck, and I was no longer a faithful wife. I am uncertain as to the duration of our visit. However, upon my departure from the clinic, my lips were still tingling with his scent and my body was still quivering from the events that had transpired. I had recently betrayed my spouse. However, the most alarming aspect was that I harbored no remorse. I endeavored to maintain my composure as I drove home. Matthew had already prepared dinner when I arrived at the residence. He embraced me from behind, gently kissed me on the forehead, and inquired, "How was your day? Is everything in order?" I swallowed the rock in my throat and forced a smile. "It is satisfactory." Ethan reported that the treatment is proceeding smoothly. An additional fabrication. Matthew's complete trust in me caused me to feel both regretful and confident that I could continue to deceive without being discovered. I persisted. Ethan and I were unable to cease after the initial experience. Every time we visited the clinic, we discovered opportunities to share moments. Occasionally it was merely a fleeting look or a gentle touch. However, there were instances in which we rushed toward each other as if we were lovers, as the clinic was vacant. Matthew was not inquired about by Ethan. I also neglected to mention him. I was the sole individual present during our time together. Additionally, Ethan. In that universe, there was no other individual. I was aware that this was incorrect. However, I was prevented from ceasing. I was adamant about continuing. Additionally, I was unaware of this. The repercussions of these events would occur at a quicker pace than I had anticipated. I previously believed that it was merely an error, that if I could regulate my emotions, everything would return to its original state. However, I was mistaken. Ethan and I were unable to cease after the initial experience. I initially attempted to maintain a normal demeanor upon my return home, continuing to portray the role of a devoted, adoring wife by Matthew's side. However, one aspect remained constant. Once, I eagerly anticipated my clinic appointments. A week. Subsequently twice. Subsequently 3 times. I devised an assortment of justifications to justify my return. According to the physician, it is imperative that we undergo more rigorous monitoring. He prescribed a novel medication. Therefore, I must enter to evaluate its efficacy. The treatment of infertility is intricate, and it is necessary to exercise patience in order to achieve results. Matthew had confidence in me. Always he had faith in me. And it was this trust that enabled me to continue to deceive him without any suspicion. The clinic door would slam shut behind me each time I entered, and all moral boundaries would dissolve. From the outset, Ethan engaged in a struggle, implemented an effort to maintain an air of professionalism. "Sarah, we should not persist in this manner. You are married. I do not wish to be the third individual. I am not interested in disrupting your marriage." Nevertheless, his rationality was shattered every time my lips caressed him, as it was with mine. We were unable to resist each other. We harbored affection for one another. I believed that was the case. On occasion, I would simply sit beside him and listen to his voice as he recounted his life. Ethan had never been married. He had been in a few relationships, but none of them elicited a sense of connection that was sufficient. It is possible that I have always been anticipating the arrival of someone. He gazed at me with intense intensity, and I understood the message he was conveying. I refrained from responding. I discreetly placed my hand on his cheek, feeling the familiar warmth that I was unable to find in Matthew any longer. I anticipated experiencing feelings of remorse. However, why did I not do so? I harbored affection for Matthew. Nevertheless, Ethan instilled in me an intense yearning and a ferocious passion that I had never experienced in my marriage. I continued to be the ideal wife each time I exited the clinic. I served Matthew dinner, greeted him with a smile, and cradled him at night. However, I was no longer the Sarah I had been on the inside. There were instances in which Ethan and I were nearly discovered. One day, as I lie on the bed in the clinic, my breathing still labored from the passionate moments, Ethan abruptly rose. My attendant is still present, which is a shame. I promptly donned my attire in an effort to regain my composure. The door was knocked on. "Dr. Sterling, there is a patient who desires to see you." My heart ceased to beat as I stood motionless. Everything would have been concluded if an individual had entered at that precise moment. As if nothing had transpired, Ethan adjusted his blouse and exited the room. He returned a few minutes later, and I held my breath and waited. It is acceptable. She has vanished. Ethan breathed an exhalation of relief. However, from that day forward, I was aware that we were engaging in a dangerous game. I was unable to maintain my frequent visits to the clinic without eliciting suspicion. However, I was unable to ignore Ethan. We began convening in alternative locations. Ethan leased a modest apartment in the city where we were totally unknown. I would fabricate an alibi to spend time with friends whenever Matthew embarked on a business trip, but in reality, I would abandon myself to Ethan's embrace. We were akin to two addicts, unable to maintain our separation. There were moments when I lay next to Ethan and contemplated the person I had become. I had ceased to be the devoted Sarah and the affectionate wife. I was a traitor. However, the most alarming aspect was that I was unwilling to cease. I believed that I could maintain the confidentiality of this information indefinitely. However, there was one detail that I had overlooked. There is no such thing as an eternal secret. Additionally, I was unaware that the repercussions of my actions were beginning to manifest within me. A minuscule organism was developing. An existence that was not Matthew's. I was expecting. I had consistently believed that I was capable of managing every aspect of life. I have the potential to be an ideal wife to Matthew and the ardent lover to Ethan, without anyone knowing. I could continue to engage in this double game indefinitely, relishing the desires of both males without any repercussions. However, I was mistaken. One morning in September, I came to the realization that something was amiss. I was awoken by a severe bout of vertigo. My thoughts are disorganized. My entire body was inert in a manner that I had never experienced before. Matthew was still sleeping soundly beside me, his arm loosely draped around my waist, and his breathing was consistent. I hastily entered the bathroom after gingerly removing his hand. Upon gazing into the mirror, I saw an entirely different visage. I am pale, haggard, and my eyes are filled with dread. This is impossible. I searched through my drawer and retrieved the pregnancy test that I had previously stored, as I had never anticipated the necessity of it. As I opened it, my palms were trembling. I remained seated on the commode, anticipating the results for what seemed like an eternity. One line followed by two. Optimistic. I was expecting. I had the sensation that the universe was collapsing beneath my feet. I made an effort to maintain my composure, convincing myself that it was possible that this was Matthew's offspring. We continued to share a bed and pursue pregnancy. It is possible that this was the miracle I had been anticipating. However, a voice in my head continued to murmur, "No." I was aware of the number of times I had shared a bed with Matthew in the previous month, and I was also aware that I had slept with Ethan more than once. I had a gut feeling that this infant was not Matthew's. It belonged to Ethan. I felt fear gradually overtake my body as my hand grasped my stomach. What actions should I take? I exited the restroom in an effort to alleviate my anxiety. Matthew was awoken and preparing coffee in the kitchen when I emerged from the house. He returned with a gentle smile. "Did you have a restless night? You appear somewhat fatigued." I suppressed my anxiety and forced a smile. "Perhaps it is simply functional. You have been experiencing some degree of anxiety." Matthew harbored no suspicions. He gently kissed my forehead as he drew me in. "It is possible that you could benefit from some more sleep. I do not wish for you to exert yourself beyond your capacity." I experienced an immense sense of remorse. Matthew had shown me such affection. He had placed an immense amount of confidence in me. Nevertheless, I had betrayed him. I was now carrying the offspring of another man. I was aware that I could not conceal this information from myself. I required a conversation with Ethan. I visited the clinic the following day. Upon entering, I experienced an entirely new sensation. I no longer feel the thrill of meeting my beloved. Rather, I am scared. Ethan gazed at me with his characteristically genial smile. Sarah, you have arrived ahead of schedule. I do not have an appointment with you today. I gulped and then exhaled deeply before uttering the words that astonished us both. Ethan, I am currently expectant. His smile dissipated. He gazed at me with his sharp blue eyes as if to verify that he had understood me accurately. Are you certain? I nodded. Ethan stood up and began to pace the room, nervously running his palms over his face. I had never observed him so agitated. What is the status of Matthew? His voice was strained as he gazed at me. He is currently unaware of any information. Are you planning to inform him? I refrained from responding immediately. I was unable to confront him with the truth. The situation would be terminated if Matthew discovered the information. I am married. My life. It would be the end of everything. Ethan sighed and proceeded to approach me, gradually placing his palm on my belly. Is this our child, correct? I was unable to conceal the truth. Silently, I nodded. At that instant, I observed an unusual light in Ethan's eyes. Do not be alarmed. I am not afraid. However, something akin to optimism. What are you planning to do? I was unaware. I had never been so bewildered. I am unable to inform Matthew. I will allow him to believe that this is his offspring. Ethan's irises were a shade of gray as he gazed at me. His desire to protest was evident to me. But he did not say anything, because we were both aware. There was no other alternative. I maintained the most flawless facade I had ever constructed from that day forward. I disclosed the information to Matthew, and as I anticipated, he burst into tears of joy. He embraced me tightly, murmuring in my ear, "Finally, we have a genuine family." I endeavored to suppress my tears by squeezing his hand. I was aware. I was deceiving the individual who held me in the highest regard. I was compelled to observe him care for me on a daily basis. He was concerned about the infant he believed to be his. When he caressed my belly, I observed his joyful eyes, his radiant expressions as he announced to everyone that he was going to become a father. And each time I experienced an inner sense of death. Ethan maintained his silence. I continued to maintain my confidentiality. However, I was aware he would not remain silent indefinitely. Additionally, this information would eventually be disclosed. Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.